Well, I'm turning you off.
Yeah.
Alrighty, I'm
This
going
is
to.
something I'm not seeing. Do you have a,
Hey, we're gonna start letting people in, Chris. So
okay,
maybe try to figure that out in the back.
all right.
If you can't, let me know. I'll share my presentation. Hello, everyone, and welcome to New York Augmented Reality. It's so nice to see many familiar faces. Hi, Dorothy. I see you in the audience. It's good to see you. Josh, Lucy, Greg, Stephen. I hope you guys are doing well. I see my grandfather and grandmother in the audience. Welcome. Hopefully you'll get something out of tonight's event. It's so great to be here tonight, and I'll just get right into it. So even though people are rolling in, they may miss a few non-important points, but that's all good. Usually I wear a button down. Tonight I'm wearing just a t-shirt. Just thought I would start out with that. My name is Andy Agus. I'm a creative technologist at Bully Entertainment, and it's great to be here tonight. Before we get started, I want to thank Meetup for reminding me that I'm hosting New York Augmented Reality today. Without this notification, tonight's event would have blown right over my head. Thankfully, I pulled myself out of bed and started to work on organizing tonight's presentations and lineups. We have a really good meetup tonight, and we worked super hard to provide you with a group of incredible speakers, and I think you're going to love tonight's event. We have Barry Seff here with us tonight, live from his mobile phone.
Hello.
Welcome, Barry.
Welcome.
Barry's the co-organizer of the meetup, and without him, none of this would be possible. Barry is like New York Augmented Reality's father, fostering the meetup like a newborn child. We've been meeting since November 2020, and today marks our 9th consecutive monthly meetup. If that math isn't adding up, well, there was even a daytime one in the mix. We've had more than 30 incredible speakers from the best and brightest minds across the industry, and our group continues to grow steadily. I don't know where I got muted, but we've had more than 30 incredible speakers, and we are now close to 700 members today. So that is New York Augmented Reality. We have a lot going for us, but we can still improve. Although AR is an exciting space, we also recognize that behind the rose-colored holographic glasses are isolated developers and designers looking for ways to connect with other passionate individuals in the space to create exciting projects to inform the industry's future. So here are some ways we can foster relationships. First, we recommend that everyone in the meetup tries using the built-in Zoom chat for the following actions. A, messaging the entire group to say what up or have a good day or this is AR awesome. B, DM for my grandma in the audience. This means direct message. DM your secret crush to share your admiration for them and their work. C, ask questions to the speakers through the chat. There will be a 5-minute Q&A after each presentation, so make sure you are prepared. Next, period 4, overtime. After the speeches are all over, we've implemented the time for you to turn on your mic and meet some other interesting AR gurus and share the personal projects that you've been working on. And then lastly, we created a Slack channel to help continue the conversation after the event, which you can join via the link in the chat, which I will post somehow. Everyone, let's see. Barry, I'm going to send it to you. Could you just post it? Thank you. And here we'll be sharing the latest news in AR and also be posting about relevant partnerships and opportunities that New York Augmented Reality has to offer. Now, such as this partnership with Chromic Duo. Chromic Duo is a remarkable music and technology group, and well, let me have them explain it to you. Hopefully you guys can share your screen. Dorothy, Lucy,
Let's do that.
hello, welcome.
Hi.
Hello.
Hey. Hello. So I'm usually not as much in motion, but hey, I'm Lucy, and that is Dorothy over there.
I'm Dorothy. Hi.
Yeah.
Okay, if
Sorry.
everyone can hear me okay, even I'm quite away, right? I think.
Sounds great.
Yeah. Hi, everyone. It's really nice to meet you.
Hello.
We are Chromic Duo, and we are, I guess, new media artists. Like, we start off as being musicians, and we like branched out to do like, composing or like collaborating with like different mediums like film, dancers, and recently we have like started projects from with AR, and that's how we got connected with Andy and heard about this amazing meetup that you guys do. So we really want to like say hello and present some of our projects, or maybe like some people have other ideas coming from different backgrounds. We love that collaboration vibe. Yeah, Lucy, you want to add anything?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I want to add that like our work still includes music and how sound can be a way of storytelling and connecting the dots between different mediums. So whether or not we are working in film or in augmented reality, like using like Unity or any other kind of like Spark AR kind of platforms, that are like at the end of the day, it's still our goal is to create connection between people, and whether or not that's like online or in person, like in a concert space. What we are really interested in getting back into more of a in-person feel or into more hybrid events is to create like the kind of like gamification, or to create different kinds of platforms for AAPI stories to be told, which kind of leads us into the current project that we're working on and the one that we're finishing up that's wrapping up actually. Well, wrapping up, I mean that it's launching this Friday. It's our first, it's a second augmented reality project, which is in collaboration with the New York Philharmonic and their education program. So they have a very young composers program that usually they look forward to having their pieces premiered by the Philharmonic at the end of the year. And seeing how that wasn't a possibility, they asked us to premiere their pieces. So instead of filming the pieces and just like playing, like the visuals and audio, we decided that we wanted to give them a site-specific experience that celebrates New York City, that's also inspired by Ellen Reid's Sound Walk at the New York Philharmonic. So Dorothy, could you go drop some info about that as far as the press release and all this? So basically it starts off in Central Park at West 72nd Street, and it leads to Lincoln Center and to the mural initiative that is in response to the AAPI hate crime. So Amanda, or she's known on Instagram as A Long Last Name, has an initiative that's called I Still Believe in Our City. So if you've walked past the Lincoln Center, you can see that we belong here. And it's the story, I guess, the narrative is centered around her, and as well as like using the kids' pieces to create this like hopefully a special experience. So yeah, that's our project, and it'll be up for 2 months, like until Labor Day. And with our next project, we are hoping to we'll start rolling out calls for AAPI composers, and in the effort of supporting local businesses in Chinatown. So that's going to be in collaboration with Welcome to Chinatown, as well as another AAPI organization, also Asian American Pacific Islander. In case you haven't known, it's a pretty new term that I wasn't aware of until last year. So that's with Mott Street Girls, and we are plotting along points with their different kinds of art initiatives. And so there's like the Chinatown gates, and as well as some other ones that you can see in our slides to get an idea of the kind of art that is down there. And it's really beautiful. And what we're doing is pairing sound with each different mural. So you can go, and it can almost be like a self-guided tour. There's options for either self-guided or guided tour with the current app that we're using, Gesso, a Gesso. And that just so allows you to either go by yourself or to have a storyline, like a linear narrative. So we're thinking either we could, it's in the very early stages, so we're still open to like, using gamification in it or doing some other format. Are there questions? I know I just like threw a bunch of stuff, info.
Lucy, Dorothy, you guys are incredible, and let's continue the conversation on Slack so we can continue moving the meetup forward. But I'm so happy you guys were here to introduce yourselves. You guys are awesome. I love all your work, and I can't wait to continue the discussions. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. Thank you, Alex, for having us. Sorry,
Yeah.
Andy.
Oh, my pleasure.
All right.
Thanks for joining.
All right, thanks. All right.
Peace. Additionally, we have an incredible workshop with Alex Brott from Mousepack on August 9th. So RSVP or save that in your calendar. And mobile AR adoption's thriving. 58% of people aged 13 to 49 have used augmented reality on their phones, according to the latest report by Snap. And as Barry Seff says, with great adoption comes even greater innovation. Apple released the Object Capture API, allowing developers to create 3D models out of a set of 2D images taken on an iPhone. And Apple's computer vision research division, as you can tell, I'm a fan of Apple, released a new paper that reveals a method for using 360-degree HDR images to provide a scene of specific reflections and lighting for objects that are then superimposed into AR scenes. So in the video above, you can see a pressure cooker is instanced by photogrammetry, complete with its ambient environment, leading to convincing reflections like never before seen, built right, that are not necessarily built right into texture. So the reflections are leveraged based on the environment that the 3D object is placed. So that's really cool. And aside from a patented AR headset Fedora, Facebook released the Textile Brush, an AI research project that can copy the text of a photo using a single word. So you upload a picture of your handwriting, and then it basically converts the entire type message to that type.
Even for lefties, Andy?
Actually, just righties. Sorry, Barry.
Okay.
Yeah, my bad. So this is righty only, at least for this AI research. And then Adobe released Substance 3D, a set of tools for designers looking to create the next generation of 3D content. I haven't had the chance to use it yet, but I look forward to checking it out. And now, while we recognize the opportunities in the space, we also are realistic of its limitations, but there are companies nevertheless that are working on making the impossible possible, and we are lucky to have them here with us tonight. Red 6 is using augmented reality to address the urgent demand for more efficient and effective fighter pilot training needed to face today's national security challenges. And we're excited to have Red 6 CEO Daniel Robinson here with us tonight. Daniel hails from Hartlepool, England, where he started his career in the Royal Air Force. After graduating from the Royal Air Force College Cranwell and then completing RAF flying training, he served as a fighter pilot flying the Tornado F-3 fighter, including as part of coalition forces and operations across the globe. Daniel Robinson is now founder and chief executive officer of Red 6, a company revolutionizing augmented reality for military training applications worldwide. Daniel, it's a pleasure to have you here with us tonight.
Thank you, Andy. I appreciate the time.
We look forward to hearing your story. I'm going to share some visuals, of course, as you continue the story, but feel free to get started. We're so happy that you're with us. Let's see.
You're going well. I appreciate the time. It's nice to meet you, and hi to your grandma and granddad as well. I hope they. Guys, as Andy said, my name is Dan Robinson, CEO and founder of Red 6. As Andy said, Red 6 was founded to solve what I believe to be a national security crisis. We basically put augmented reality up in the sky in airplanes at 400 miles an hour at multiple G-forces upside down as well. And it's somewhat of a technical challenge. So I figured I'd just give you a quick 10-15 minutes on my background, how I came to be at Thread 6 and the story so far with the company, and then maybe we can do a few questions if that sounds good. So my background, as Andy mentioned, I started out life as a fighter pilot in the Royal Air Force. I was lucky enough to graduate from what we'd call fighter weapons school, you may know as Top Gun from the movie. And then in 2006, was, I suppose, quite literally the luckiest fighter pilot in the world, and then I was selected as the only non-American to come over here and fly F-22 Raptors for the US Air Force, which is the latest stealth fighter. So that gave me access and insight into a tremendous capability. The airplane is sensational, but it also gave me insight into some of the problems associated with not just that platform, but the broader combat air force. And namely, what I'm talking about is how do we train? And in very simple terms, when we go up to fly and train, we need someone to go up and fly and train against. And that represents a multi-billion-dollar-a-year problem that we are failing at in a really bad way. It's compounded by a number of things. We don't have the pilots. We're critically short of us. We don't have the dollars. It's extremely expensive. If you take an F-22 and you go fly it for an hour, it's $100,000 an hour just to fly that airplane. And critically, and I think most importantly of all, as a nation, we've been involved in supporting counterinsurgency warfare in the Middle East for the last 20 to 30 years. And what I've seen and my colleagues in the service have seen over the last 20 to 30 years, as well as whilst we've been focused on that critically important mission set, two things have happened on the world stage. You've seen the reemergence of Russia and proliferation of sophisticated technology coming out of there, going to state actors that are not necessarily friendly towards the West. And most importantly, I suppose, is the rise of China and the pace of innovation coming out of China. And that is significant because the technology is so good now that even if we had the pilots, the airplanes, and the dollars to train to the threat, it's very difficult for us to simulate that kind of near-peer technology. So how to solve it? Well, I am definitely not an AR expert. It's been a massive education for me over the last 4 years. But I actually left the Air Force in 2009 and built a company and sold a company, and then came back to my love of flying. And the story is really serendipitous because I decided in 2017 that I was going to build an airplane. And it's the airplane you see on the screen right now. That started out from scratch for 15-hour days of me sanding inside that airplane. It's a story in itself, but let's just say it was a serendipitous meeting of minds, and life, the universe, be it whatever way you choose to view life, was telling me to build the airplane. And so I set about literally building it from scratch, not knowing really what I was going to do with it, but understanding that I had to do it. And as I was doing that, I started to think about the problems associated with training again. And then one day into my life walked two individuals with rich backgrounds in AR and VR. And those individuals were Nick Bitchenscher and Glenn Snyder. And Glenn in particular, back in 2015, had pulled off a world first in virtual reality, in that he'd taken two race cars, put them, real race cars, on two separate racetracks at the same time, put two race car drivers, one in each of the cars, created a virtual reality system, and both drivers put a headset on, were able to see each other in a virtual world, and they, no kidding, raced real race cars completely blind to the outside world. And so the idiot fighter pilot here looks at that, and I asked the 5 real questions. Firstly, guys, that's amazing. Can we do that in airplanes? And they looked at me and scratched their heads for a couple of weeks, and we got our heads together and came back with a yes, technically challenging, but we think we could do it. The next question I asked, having no real understanding of AR and VR back in the day, was, okay, no one is going to allow fighter pilots to fly around in virtual reality completely blind to the outside world. So the obvious question is, can we do that in augmented reality? And they looked at me as if I was crazy and said, absolutely not. And I said, why? And they said, because augmented reality barely works outdoors, walking down the street at 2 miles an hour. It certainly doesn't work outdoors up in the sky at 300-400 miles an hour, pulling 9 Gs and going upside down. And so I said, why is that? And the cliff notes of that journey in the early days, where we kept asking why until we came up with a thesis as to how we might approach this problem set. And with that thesis, we approached the Air Force. And the Air Force have been working on a similar solution to solving the training crisis that I mentioned. And they refer to that as the live, virtual, and constructive ecosystem. And the live, virtual, constructive ecosystem seeks to solve, use synthetic training to solve the exact problems I described earlier in the chat. So live, real pilots and real airplanes flying up in the sky. Virtual is the ability to connect real pilots in simulators on the ground and sort of beam them up into the sky such that pilots in airplanes flying around can look down on their screens and see these entities up there. And constructive is a similar thing to virtual, only it is entirely autonomously driven by artificial intelligence. So synthetic entities up in the sky thinking for themselves. And that ecosystem, LVC, live, virtual, constructive, works really well in the beyond visual range environment. And it's an important distinction to understand because the role of a fighter pilot is twofold. Beyond visual range, let's say unclassified 100 miles down to say 10 nautical miles. Generally speaking, we're flying our airplanes, we're looking down at our radar scope, we're firing missiles, we're trading shots, etc., but it's all done on the radar scopes looking down. The role of a fighter pilot changes dramatically once you start to transgress the 10 nautical mile in range. And it transitions from that sitting down, being a tactician / chess player to you're putting the proverbial gum shield in, you're going for a fist fight because you're now going to visually engage with an airplane. And the problem with live, virtual, constructive is at that 10 nautical mile range where we go from heads down, looking at a radar scope to looking out of the window, where are they? The entire ecosystem collapses. Why is that? Because there's no way to synthetically put the entities into the field of view of the pilots and have them behave and act as if they were real airplanes. Well, there is now. So we have solved the missing piece of the live, virtual, constructive ecosystem in that we can put virtual airplanes up into the sky. The pilots in AR headsets can look and see out of the cockpit and fly and train against. And with that, we've ushered in an exciting new paradigm on what is possible for training. So for the last 4 years, we've been working with the Air Force to prove that our idea and our thesis works. It started with a number of challenges. One was prove that your approach to augmented reality, which was subtly different or dramatically different, I guess, would work initially in a cockpit on the ground in a static environment. And then having done that, baby steps in terms of proving that it would work up in the sky on a bright blue day. And so the challenges we were given was initially, can you start by just fixing an object in three-dimensional space up in the sky? And so we became known for this three-dimensional cube that we put in the skies of Southern California. And the three-dimensional cube is wireframe, so imagine it doesn't have any sides. And we've locked that in space such that you can take off in the airplane you see on the screen right now, fly up into the sky, and observe through the AR headset a huge 500 feet by 500 feet framed cube. And the reason we made it framed and not solids is that we could take that airplane and fly it through the cube up in the sky to demonstrate the immersive aspects of AR. And we all understand, being AR converts, how fantastic it can be when it works really well. And so it is so compelling that when I'm physically flying the airplane up in the sky and I fly through this cube, I'm careful not to hit the wings of the airplane on the sides of the cube. And that's a really exciting thing to think about, because it really is ushering in something that's truly transformational for training. Having proved that that would work, then the Air Force then set us the next challenge of, okay, guys, these are really big claims you're making. Now prove that you can go and do this against moving entities that are geolocated correctly to the real world, that are dynamic and moving around at 300-400 miles an hour. And so we did that. And so right now, the airplane you see on screen, you're capable of taking off in that airplane, climbing up into the sky and flying an intercept on a virtual augmented reality tanker. The tracking solution is so accurate that I can pull up alongside this airplane that doesn't exist, that's flying around the skies. I can fly formation on it very accurately. I can slide in behind. And this, if you imagine it's a gas station in the sky, we have a boom that sits down behind it. I can simulate a plug of taking gas in an airborne environment. I can then leave that tanker. I can then fly an intercept, and I can go engage airplanes and dogfight against them as if I was doing it for real. And it is working in such a compelling fashion that the Air Force now have gone beyond the experimental prototypical stage with us, and we're integrating into our first Air Force platform as we speak. That program is kicking off. In terms of the business cycle, we've we've just closed the Series A. We've raised over $45 million. It was a $30 million Series A, which was really great for us. We're very excited about that. It was led ultimately by Snowpoint Ventures. And we've had some other really compelling investors along the way, including Lockheed Martin, who made I think their first investment in an AR/VR company. Everything I've discussed so far pertains to a single aircraft, and the work that we're doing now is connecting multiple airplanes into this game space. Think of it as a multiplayer video game played up in the sky in real airplanes. And that system we're developing is called Carbon. Carbon is the combined augmented reality battle space operational network. In essence, a massive, huge multiplayer video game played up in the sky, where we connect a bunch of nodes, the ATARS nodes that we've developed, think multiple airplanes, all connected together into one common game space, such that we can see the entities up there and fly and fight against them as if we were doing it for real. So that's where we are right now. That's probably a decent point to stop, Andy, very conscious of the time. I'm happy to sort of pause there and take questions if you guys would like to shoot me some. Over.
Thank you, Daniel, for coming, and a really compelling story. And we have a few questions rolling in the chat. So for those, I'll pass them off to Barry to handle the questions.
All right. Well, our speaker, Michael Weinstein, has a great question. Does Red 6 focus more resources on the hardware or software components of your training solution?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's a hardware-software combination. So where we've been able to use COTS applications, we've done exactly that. But you know, some of the stuff, the majority of the stuff out there, particularly as it pertains to the optics and the headset we had to create, just wasn't good enough for the kind of environment that we were operating in. So we were forced to develop our own optical stack, Michael, which is you know, it's been a process in itself. But of course, you can imagine the challenges of trying to do AR up in the sky on a bright blue day with white cloud backgrounds when you've got a 10,000 nits ambient background there. It's challenging. So none of the headsets on the market were frankly good enough. And when we came to sort of the crux of figuring out the tracking solution, we just figured we'd get the best in class and bolt it into the helmet, and we'd be on our way to a solution. And we tried that, and it was just an impossible feat. So we certainly focused heavily on the optical stack. Outside of that, a lot of it is software driven, and the majority of it is software. Over.
I'm sure you can talk to Michael further if you have any additional requirements on that side. Will autonomous military robotics like swarming drones, boats, submarines, etc., that are being developed now use your technology to train the AI that's going to operate those devices?
Yeah, it's a great question, and it's a very common question as well. So I'm going to answer that in two parts. I referenced the number of different ways to control the entities, right? So we can either script the behavior of the bandits, we can control them virtually by human beings and you know, sitting in headsets on the ground, connected into the network remotely. Or the panacea is they are controlled by artificial intelligence. So we've been working with some of the companies involved in the Alpha Dogfight trials with DARPA, and the entities that you see us flying and training against now are controlled by artificial intelligence. So imagine I'm sitting in a real airplane looking out at an advanced Chinese aircraft, for example, that I perceive in augmented reality. So it doesn't exist, but it's thinking of flying and fighting for itself and acting as I would. It is absolutely something to behold. So that's the first thing, and the data set that we're building from that is really, really important. Moving on to the core of the question in terms of the drones, the way that we would operate with drones, or the way that we would prosecute combat in the future, is going to be a blend of manned and unmanned aerial vehicles. And that's a really important thing to contemplate, because in much the same way that we carry missiles around on aircraft when we go up and train, they have a useful shelf life, right? So with the drones, the question is if the thesis is an F-22 pilot enters a piece of airspace in an F-22 and they are controlling, let's say, 10 to 20 drones, for example, are we, when we're training, are we going to actually use those drones on a day-to-day basis? The answer is a definite no, we're not. Well, AR represents a really compelling way that we can train with these entities and train with the AI algorithms without actually bringing the drones out of the box, such that we preserve the shelf life of them and only use them, for certain unique training exercises, and then, God forbid, if they were called to use them for real, we pull them out of the box and use them in operations. So AR, again, has a lot of value for that use case as well.
Awesome. Another question. This one is about SLAM. What can you share about the SLAM system? Is it a visual inertial solution, or is it primarily receiving input from the airplane's sensors?
It's a multiple sort of aspects to the approach as to how we've solved it. Pretty sensitive and patented actually. So probably not a great deal I can say about that. Suffice to say that SLAM doesn't work, and we tried everything. It just wasn't. It wouldn't cut it. So we had to develop our own tracking solution. Obviously we're operating at high speeds, multiple G-forces upside down. So it took some figuring out, but that was the core of the first patent that we filed, and it's core to how we developed it. Not too much I can say on the call, unfortunately.
Okay. There's another question here about DARPA. So maybe you can with just put dogfight.
Sorry, you broke up there. I lost the question. I didn't hear that.
Oh, do you see this technology interacting with challenges such as DARPA's Alpha Dogfight?
Absolutely, it already is. In fact, I was the first pilot in the world to fly against that artificial intelligence from DARPA's Alpha Dogfight trials. We've been working with one of the companies out of there, and we basically are running the algorithms right now in the software. And some of the other pilots that work for me now are flying.
Well, sorry, Daniel, can you just step back? Like, I personally don't know what Alpha Dogfight is. Can you tell us what that is first, and then direct the question?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. So Alpha Dogfight is a program run by DARPA, and it is concerned with using. Basically, the fundamental question is: can artificial intelligence fly basic fighter maneuvers in air combat better than a human being can? Right, and early indications, and I think it will come as no surprise to anyone that yes, inevitably it will get there for sure. And so the AI algorithms that DARPA are developing run through simulations right now. The interesting thing for us and what we're doing is that we're the only company in the world that's building a data set where real pilots and real airplanes are actually flying against those AI algorithms, but rather than us have to fly against physical assets, which could be obviously dangerous, particularly until the AI algorithms have built sufficient trust to understand behavior. We're flying against the same algorithms, but we're perceiving it through augmented reality. So it's a really compelling use case for the tech.
Awesome. Cool. Thank you for that. Me not knowing much about all the defense projects. Okay, here's an interesting question about what if you forget that you're in reality while you're up there? How will that work with it? Would the algorithms take over, or like if someone passes out or something like that? I mean, there's things. How does the system deal with that type of? Maybe that's what they're trying to ask. I'm not really clear, but they also have a follow-up question about how is empathy treated. So maybe that's related to it.
How is empathy treated? Was the question?
Yeah, that was a follow-up to that question, maybe a separate question, but these are kind of more ethereal questions, I'd say.
Yeah, I mean, we shouldn't really sugarcoat what we're doing here, right? I mean, we're up there to for a purpose, and perhaps empathy is not necessarily a thing that we factor into our thinking too often when we're up there doing what we're supposed to be doing. I will say, in terms of the discombobulation that people worry about with AR, it's not a factor. It's a common question again, but the reality of it is, the beauty of it is, it's augmented reality, right? Virtual reality would be a valid question, because obviously, if you got confused in virtual reality and the sensors or something collapsed, it could be fatal. But the reality of it is, and the beauty of AR is, that we see the real world exactly as we would for real. The only thing that's different is that we're flying against augmented assets rather than real assets. So actually, the argument is that it's much safer because there's less things to bump into. And the golden rule of flying air combat is don't, right? So augmented reality is, I would argue, actually much safer than flying it for real, which is a dangerous business.
Well, thank you so much, Daniel, for joining. It was
Awesome.
a pleasure to have you on.
You're welcome. Thanks for the time, guys. I really appreciate it.
Thank you. Feel free to stick around for our next incredible speaker, hailing from a company called Meow Wolf. Some of you may know them. They're an immersive art and entertainment collective based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. And we're excited to have Lauren Kaysen here. Lauren's is a creative technologist based in Santa Fe, New Mexico. After getting her start in games as an intern at the MIT Game Lab, she went on to work on multiple award-winning titles, including Monument Valley 2, which I love that game. That wasn't in the bio, but I do love that game, for which she was selected as a Forbes 30 under 30. From there, she left games and was a prototyper in the technology development group at Apple, which I also love that company, before moving on to being the creative director of mixed reality at Meow Wolf, where her team's experience, The Garage, was selected as one of the top XR installations of 2019 by Forbes. In June, she was one of 7 creators chosen by Snap Inc. to debut the next generation spectacles. Most recently, she co-founded Refract AR, a studio that creates unique, immersive XR experiences. She's interested in making art with new technologies, forgotten technologies, and sometimes no technologies at all. Without further ado, Lauren Kaysen.
Hi, friends. Thanks for the introduction, Andy. Here, let me share my deck. So I'm going to be talking to y'all today about the experience that I built using the Snap-on spectacles, what my take on their hardware, their software, their ecosystem is, how you'll be able to get a hold of some spectacles, and a little bit about their creator program. So if you want to get your cool art funded, how you might be able to do that. Yeah, so designing for the next generation of spectacles. Andy just gave me a great intro. So here's the obligatory slide of lots and lots of logos. I've had the opportunity to do some cool things, but what we're really interested in here today is the spectacles. So I have them here. They are really light. They're only 134 grams. The display is a waveguide display. They have 6 degrees of freedom, 26.3 degree FOV. So if you're familiar with the original HoloLens, that is just a little smaller than that. 2 cameras, 4 microphones, speakers. They're capable of spatial audio. They have a touchpad right here. So while you're wearing them, you can be swiping here like that. And 2000 nits brightness. So one of the things that's interesting about this headset is that turned it on. The spectacles are tinted and they're very bright. So they're really optimized to be working outside, which when they told me we want you to make experiences which are meant to be outdoors, I was like, oh, I don't actually think that that's what you want. That never works. But they do, they work really well outside, which is really cool, and they're untethered. The not so great side of stuff, they are smaller than a HoloLens, but they are not that small. They look really dorky on me. They're huge on my face. But they're really comfortable compared to a HoloLens or a Magic Leap or any of the other HMD options that you have out there right now. God, it's like it's turning on. One sec, sorry. They have a kind of vertical FOV, which is a little weird if you're used to a HoloLens or you're used to a Magic Leap where it's horizontal. This is a little more upright. You know, I think they're optimizing for faces, which makes sense for Snap. And I don't actually know if that's what they're doing. That's just my guess. You're going to hit your thermal before you hit your battery with these, or at least you are if you are me and you use a lot of particle systems. So the battery life lasts somewhere between 15 to 30 minutes, but I hit my thermal usually somewhere around 10-minute mark. They definitely stop you before you get to the like skin burning point, which I can't say that that's necessarily been true for every headset that I've ever worked with, but they will stop you a lot earlier than you hit your battery life. And you can't adjust the IPD. So I have a very small IPD, so I actually find it pretty hard to focus with these. They're still on and going through their little intro animations. But the strength of working with this headset wasn't really necessarily the hardware, though the hardware is really cool. I actually think it's the ecosystem. So it has a super seamless integration with Lens Studio. When you're in Lens Studio, their preview image or their preview for what the things you're building looks like in headset works really well. They've done a really good job of like showing you what things are going to look like in your waveguide rather than like showing you the perfect ideal from Unity. You can push things to your phone or to the lenses really easily, and the iteration is super quick. So as long as my spectacles, my laptop, and my phone are all on the same Wi-Fi, I can just hit a button in Lens Studio and it's on my phone and it's on the spectacles in seconds. And any video that I take from the spectacles is instantly on my phone. So iteration is just super, super fast. And also the files that it generates are very small. So a lot of the work that I was doing that I'll show you in a little bit, I was doing some site-specific installations that were in fairly remote locations. And I was working off of a little hotspot. So I was able to be working on site really easily because those files were really small. Yeah, previews the mimics, the waveguides really well. And also you have all of the strengths of social AR and NHMD. So the fact that it's easy for me to get this experience to other people. But then I also have the ability to create an experience which somebody who doesn't have the headset is going to be able to experience based on their phone. And somebody who does have the headset, I can push the same file and they're both going to have access. So it just makes everything go pretty quick for getting things out there. So what did I actually make? I've just said a bunch of stuff about the headset and the ecosystem, but what did I build? When I was doing my design exploration, I knew I wanted to do something that was connecting physical and digital. Those are the two things that I, bringing those together is what I find really interesting in AR. So originally I was like, maybe I'll make like a meditation thing where you teach square breath using a cube. But turns out like Merge Cube exists and is like in Walmart and already really full. So no cubes out. Then I was like, maybe what about like weather vanes? So I was going to do this like art piece where each of the cardinal directions was going to be an image tracker, and then you'd track to whatever direction the wind was going, and then you'd walk in that direction, and you'd have the wind at your back and like listen to some sort of poem. And they were like, nah, like way too weird, too artsy. And I was like, okay, cool. Maybe I'll find some weather people. I'll find some weather vane friends. I'm gonna make my weird weather vane someday. Was not today. So the place that I ended up was road signs. So why road signs? So they have a couple things going for them for an AR experience. One, they're in pullouts, so they are meant to be stopped at. They're meant for you to pull out and safely stop and look at them, which is not true for a lot of sort of public infrastructure. So that's not true for billboards. It's not true for stop signs. It's not true for most of the sort of large signs that you see out in the world that you might stop at. They're easy to track. They're huge. They're variable. They're high contrast. They're in the public domain, or at least the ones in New Mexico are, and I love them very, very much. Everyone who's ever been on a road trip with me has been annoyed by the fact that we have to stop at every single historic marker. I just think they're really cool, and I wanted to do something with them. And I also knew I wanted to do something interesting with the art direction. So there's something specific that I wanted to explore. One was I wanted to look at like quieter art styles. I think a lot of AR tends towards a real psychedelic maximalism, which I'm super guilty of in all of the work that I did at Meow Wolf. That is totally what Meow Wolf is psychedelic maximalism. But what could you do when you're not just overloading people with color and like stuff? So I wanted to see, you know, how small could you get in terms of the art direction? And then I also wanted to play with some optical illusion and some things that are specific to a waveguide headset. So waveguides, the way they work, if you're not familiar, is that it's additive light. So you can only make things brighter. You cannot make something darker with a waveguide headset. But with the work that I did on Maya Valley 2 was all about optical illusion. And I always come back to this image, which that gray bar in the middle is all the same color, but you're perceiving the area on the right to be darker because of that dark to light gradient. So would it be possible by really leaning into that gradient and like contrast between dark and light to create the illusion that you have like a greater range of luminosity than you actually do in a waveguide headset? So what was the final concept? There were a couple directions that I thought I might be interested in going, and I thought I was going to pick one. So the first was education. So how could AR layers expand the educational content of one of these signs? Could you see the geography of a landscape labeled? Could I see a historical figure standing next to it? How can I increase the educational content of a place? The other was hidden layers, that a lot of these road signs are in places that have really cool stories that probably are never going to have a government marker. So how could we use the infrastructure that's already there to tell those other really, really cool and interesting stories? And then the other was that in 2017, New Mexico, which I love New Mexico, they're such a cool state, and they had an initiative where they put up 100 markers for historic women from New Mexico. So working with it as more of a curatorial project, working with local New Mexican female artists to create experiences through the eyes of modern New Mexican women of these, historic New Mexican women. And so rather than doing the smart thing and saying, I will do one of those, I said, I will do all of them, Snapchat. So don't be like me, don't do that. But I am really pleased with how it came out. So the first one that I built was called Caldera. This was at the Valle Caldera, which is in Jemez, and it is based around the Valle Grand Historic Marker. So you stand in front of the marker, you see a visualization that explains to you how the caldera was formed 1.5 million years ago, and the size of it and all of those cool things, and you hear it. And then when you look out over the horizon, you see the different peaks labeled that you're able to see in your little visualization in front of you. So when I was doing that, the first thing that I realized was I was going to need to figure out a way to test these at home. So even though many of these were not actually all that far from where I live, and I could drive out to them, it was getting really hard to like me to go out there every day to test. So I made a big fake sign, and that worked out pretty well. I was able to set it up in my yard and be able to walk around it and use it to sort of figure out what things would be like. If I can change something, I would have made this a lot more accurate to the material of the sign. I at least would have made it brown, because when I was looking at stuff in headset, it looked like stuff was working visually, that once I got to the signs and it was on a lighter background, it definitely wasn't. The second lens that I made was called Anita. So this was based around Anita Scott Coleman. She was a poet who lived in Silver City, New Mexico. She wrote around the turn of the century, and her work was associated with the Harlem Renaissance. She was one of the only writers or only poets associated with the Harlem Renaissance outside of New York. And she wrote about the Black experience in the Southwest. So I worked with Ebony Isis Booth, who is a local New Mexican poet. And we had her do a reading of one of Anita's poems called Portraiture. And then, so you hear Ebony doing her interpretation of the poem when you stand in front of the sign, and you see this parallax portrait of her. And the poem talks a lot about trees. So you see the trees, and you have this full immersive experience of this woman's poetry. One of the things that I did for the Anita sign, and which I love as part of my process, is using Scaniverse or other phone photogrammetry apps for getting quick iteration done. So I'm not trying to get like great, perfect photogrammetry scans, but rather just trying to get something that's a good enough facsimile into Maya as fast as possible, and even on site. So I can say like, okay, like what is this going to look like scale wise in front of this thing? And doing that as much as possible, like at the sign, getting the scan there and then sitting in front of it and putting everything together in that location makes a real difference in terms of the final experience. And then the last ones that I built was called Hum. So this is located at the Taos Historic Marker. It's an audio visualizer of the Taos Hum, which is this legendary sound that about 2% of the population say that they can hear. Whoops. And Hum, it's this audio visualizer that you could walk in and out of. And this was a sort of hidden layers one. So the Taos Historic Marker tells you like it was founded by Governor so-and-so in this year and it has a population of this much. But Taos has this like super amazing and interesting legend associated with it. So going with that. Snap did not actually have the ability to create audio reactive lenses. You couldn't plug into the mic when I built this, but they just released the ability to do that in the new Lens Studio 4.0. So the workaround I did is no longer relevant, but would definitely recommend checking out that new tool because it's super cool. And yeah, that was the project that I built. It was, it was one of the first projects to launch with this headset. And you can make stuff for the Snap Spectacles now too, with 2 ways. You can just apply to get a pair of spectacles by going to the Spectacles website. So you can't buy them right now. You can only apply to get them. So they want to keep it small and sort of within creators, which is another thing that makes me think that they're aiming at the ecosystem here first rather than the consumer, but I don't actually have any inside knowledge on that. That's completely a guess. Or you can apply for the Ghost Innovation Lab Fellowship. So they're giving out fellowships of between $15,000 and $150,000. They're looking for things in education, fashion or shopping, 5G, commerce or enterprise, or just like general application and games. So if you have cool ideas about that, Snap's giving out money. So go get some. And we should talk if you like archaeological reconstruction. I'm really interested in the ways that AR could improve the way that we see archaeology, especially really delicate archaeology, things that we don't want to excavate, but things that we do want to elucidate. I'm interested in anything and anybody who's connecting physical and digital things and merging those worlds thoughtfully. I'm really interested in AR curriculum for high school after school tech programs. I'm doing a lot of that work here in New Mexico. New Mexico has one of the worst standings for STEM education in the States. So that's super near and dear to my heart. And if you have cool thoughts or programs or things that you could do for that, then I want to talk to you. Ethical augmented reality. This is like a super nascent technology, and defining like what does it mean to create things with this ethically, or if you're just making cool stuff, I want to be your friend. And that's what I got for you. So this is my email. That is my Instagram where I post all of my experiments. And then I think I said everything is o'clock. I just gave notice at Meow Wolf. So I'm founding a very small studio with an engineer that I've worked with for a long time called Refract AR. We do mostly spatial activation, so the things sort of like this where we're putting stuff in the real world and in specific locations. So if you want us to make you things like that, hit us up. And yeah, thank you.
Wow, thank you. Awesome.
Thank you,
Amazing
Lauren.
stuff. Great. Okay, so let me ask you some questions from the audience. Do you think Snap, based upon your experience, of course, will continue pursuing gaming, entertainment, delightful applications, which are particularly difficult to do in a lightweight head-mounted display HMD, or do you see them trying to push to expand their platform for more lightweight, all-day phone type experiences like productivity, communication, information retrieval? And they're trying to say, have they signaled anything to you, I guess from your work there, about their next steps is what they're looking at.
Well, I'd say you could look at the verticals that they have for their fellowship program, right? So they're handing out money to people right now to make games, and they're handing out large amounts of money to people to make games. I think, like, if I were to take a guess, I think they're figuring it out. And I think that's one of the things that's really interesting about the way that Snap has been behaving within the space versus some of the other players, is that they are going at it from a much more experimental and like releasing things and then sort of seeing what happens bent. So they've been releasing headsets, like they had the Snap spectacles for a while now, which they were just cameras that you could then put augmented reality over your stereographic stuff later, but it was still a headset. So they've been doing this experimentation with lightweight headsets for a long time, and I think they're still experimenting. So if I were going to guess, I would guess that Snap doesn't know, and that's their plan right now, is that they're handing the money out to be like, all right, like, let's see what's cool, let's see what works, and that then they'll make a choice from there.
Definitely. Yeah. I mean, I'm personally not on Snap, but my teenage children are. But I don't know any teenagers that have the spectacles, but maybe they're going to get it through get the new SDK and start making new experiences like yourself. Can you try these lenses out in your own environment, or do you need to be in the location? And do you need, and the second and follow up is, do you need the spectacles to view them?
Nope, nope and nope. So I released 2 versions of each lens. So they are all on my Snap, which I probably should have provided, but that is at 3.swords. So the same as my Instagram. And you can view them on both the spectacles and on the phone.
Awesome. Okay, another question on the API. Do they provide any mechanism for persistent storage so you could have users attach their own persistent content to road signs?
I believe yes, for within your own device. So I think, and I didn't try to do this, so don't quote me on it, but I think you could make something where I could place something dynamically based on that road sign image tracker. And then if I went back to it later, because you sort of load the lenses onto your device when you're on Wi-Fi, and then you can use them off. That I should be able to do that. I do not think that there is currently a mechanism to have a connected lens between two pairs of spectacles. So I don't think I could place that content and then you could then see it. But I imagine that that's something that they're working on. Also, one of the things that they've said with the Ghost Lab fellowships is they want ideas which aren't currently quite within the realm of what the spectacles can do. So just because they can't do that, if that's something that you want to do, there's no reason why you shouldn't go to Snapchat and say that.
Yeah, cool. Okay, here's a question you don't have to answer, but I think it's interesting. And when I checked out your LinkedIn, I had the same question. Is there a specific reason why you left Apple's prototype team? Seems like the dream job.
I can't talk about that, unfortunately.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, thanks for answering all the other questions. Some people had some other more technical questions, but I think that I don't know, unless Andy wants to ask any other questions for you.
Well, Lauren, I thought it was an excellent presentation. I think I see one more question there on the chat regarding SnapLens Studio specifically. What file formats does it export to? And also, what formats are you able to import into Lens Studio?
Studio takes most of the like major sort of 3D file formats. It also I think you can import a Unity file in, but that's another one of those, don't quote me on it. And it uses JavaScript as its scripting language. And as far as export, I don't actually know, because I'm not even sure if you can export like a standalone file. I think you have to export directly into a Snap account. So I don't know. I'm sure they've got their own sort of file format going there.
Awesome. Super cool presentation. I loved seeing the glasses firsthand. I thought that was especially cool. So thanks for bringing them and joining us tonight.
Yeah, totally. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Lauren. Next up, we get to learn from Michael Weinstein and Applied Materials. Michael's background is in advanced materials, and he began as a chemist synthesizing organometallic compounds with novel optical properties, and then engineering new applications for biocompatible silk protein in graduate school. Before joining Applied Materials, Michael led North American business development with Wave Optics, which was recently acquired by Snap. Currently, Michael's building a new nanostructured optics business for AR with Applied Materials as the business development manager. And at the same time, he's surfing in Northern California and creating analog photography. Thanks for joining us, Michael.
So glad to be here. All right, so let's share. All right. So there's the deck. Glad to be here with everyone. I've noticed everyone is so creative here. I guess obviously Lauren, but right, even Daniel with Red 6 building your own airplane cannot happen without having an immense amount of creativity. So I find that amazing. Looking forward to Chris's talk. Yeah, so I'm here to talk about how to make better AR experiences on the hardware side. So I'm going to focus very specifically on waveguides. This is the technology that Lauren was just speaking to in the Snap spectacles. Obviously some interesting news from that company recently. But I'm going to focus more on what Applied Materials is doing to enable this technology. It's a really big company, so I'll just start by giving an overview of what we do and then what my group, Engineered Optics, is building on the optics side of things. So Applied is a public company. You can find its stock. We primarily have business making equipment for semiconductor tools. Semiconductor is a huge topic right now, right? It's at a major inflection point in terms of the size of transistors going down and down to, now even 3 nanometers. And there's a big need for supporting that industry. It's almost kind of like the oil to our current economy right now, with, a lot better environmental implications, I guess I would say. And so it's a big company. We have about 22,000 employees. We're doing many patents and support a lot of R&D spending in the United States. So getting into the group that I work within, Applied Materials has a semiconductor group, display group, global services. So they work with fabs to make sure they can keep running and producing chips. And then there's a CTO group where we work on more innovative ideas. We incubate them and then eventually turn them into businesses. And so Engineered Optics is the biggest group within CTO at Applied Materials. And what we're really doing is taking the expertise that we already have for making this equipment and making nanostructured electronic devices like your transistors I mentioned. And these at the fundamental level are made for manipulating electrons really precisely. And so we're taking that similar concept and building devices that can manipulate photons. So combining all of these things, we can do a couple of different unique applications or solve a couple of different high value problems. I'm going to focus primarily on waveguides for AR glasses. That's kind of my main focus and background and what I love, but there's also a lot of other interesting things that we can do with this platform. One of them being flat optics for near infrared devices. So you can imagine taking a regular thick kind of phone camera module or Face ID module and thinning it down to being very flat, so you don't have that notch on the back of your phone, which is kind of a goal of some companies. And yeah, so drilling into the waveguides a little bit. We talked about this. Lauren kind of described it as additive light, and so this gets into a little bit more about how AR waveguide combiners work in a very simple sense. So this is kind of showing light going in here on the display side and then going out to the eye. We're just kind of showing a periscope just for fun. And so you have a display panel or some sort of light modulator that injects light into what's called your input section of your grating. And then kind of like a fiber optic, the light is bouncing or transmitting using total internal reflection through the substrate, whatever material that is. And then it reaches the section where your eye box is. And the goal is to have a display quality that's, you know, as close as possible to what we would expect, like high resolution, very immersive, very uniform. And kind of the bottom line is right now, I think we're in a new incubation stage for the industry, and not a lot of the displays are that great. And so we're working really hard on that, and I'll kind of get into the nerdy details as much as you guys will allow on how we're doing that. So like I said, we're hoping to get towards the state of the art. This is a classic one from the Carl Guttag blog, which if you're an AR hardware fan, then you probably have been here. You can put some test patterns through an AR headset, and typically they come out looking something like this. So this is the state-of-the-art AR display from Microsoft HoloLens. And you can see that there's color uniformity issues. You get kind of lines spreading. It's really hard to read text on a white background. White background is generally like one of the hardest tests that you can throw at an AR headset. And so we need to improve. All right. So just a list of some of the attributes that we're working on improving so you can get to a lot better performance right here. And so we're working on things like the patterning technology. You may have heard of companies that do this using very short wavelengths of light in order to get down to tiny nanostructures. So we're bringing that into play. Duty cycle is kind of, you can imagine like how you tune the efficiency of a grating when it's spitting light back out to your eye. And then high index, this is what defines the field of view that everyone will inevitably want to ask about with these devices. Oh, what's the field of view? As long as you have a really high refractive index, then you can get to much more immersive displays. That's kind of really the goal. And then other things that are unique to us are, for example, double-sided processing. So if you can have a grating on both sides of the glass, then you've just kind of doubled the throughput of your waveguide plate. And so that's important. I'll get into slanted etch a little bit. This is kind of the secret sauce, what makes us very unique and what I think is going to help us win the market. And then variable etch depth, that's kind of another trick of it that helps you get to better uniformity. And then coatings help finish the devices, and 300 millimeter, right? In semiconductor fabs, all of the devices are made on 300 millimeter substrates. And that's kind of where you need to be at with our waveguides in order to get the best cost for, which is eventually going to come down into what the users pay for this. And so we can do all these things. Getting into kind of the complexity of making a waveguide. I said we would nerd out a little bit together here today. So this is a simplified process flow. This is very different from how folks are making waveguides that you may be familiar with right now. This is not a nano imprint waveguide process flow. This is something much closer to a semiconductor approach. You can see from my virtual background, this is the clean room that we have in Santa Clara. A lot of the tools that we operate are totally under vacuum, and this is required for the best possible particle control and then dimensional performance. And so this is a very simplified flow. First, we're depositing films, so things that are very high refractive index, like I spoke to, doing patterning. FS means front side, BS means backside, and you can see that we have an etch step in the middle there, and then we go on to characterization. And so we're building all of these capabilities in-house in order to support waveguide manufacturing. Our goal is to bring the best possible devices into the market. All right, so I have another couple of kind of nerd out slides that I hope you guys will enjoy. Back to the high index inorganic materials. So what we've done here is just a simple vapor deposition of a very high refractive index material. You can see they're uniform in their coatings. They're not very rough, and then you can get to very high refractive index. So we're balancing kind of absorption, which is like the clarity that you can see when you're looking through a pair of eyeglasses, with refractive index, which is kind of like your bandwidth for making a very good AR display. And so we offer multiple of these different types of films. So you can build a lot of interesting device architectures with our portfolio of materials. All right. So then getting into image resolution, here we're showing, actually, I think this is a slide from one of the Microsoft guy, Alex Kipman's talks, showing how the manufacturing tolerances are actually immensely important for getting to a good MTF. This is basically the kind of fidelity of contrast as you're passing an image through a waveguide display. And so you can see, basically we're showing that pitch uniformity, or how far off you are from the design target, your pitch is, kind of the repeating structure of your gratings, is going to make a huge impact. And so we don't think it's enough to kind of take the cheapest possible manufacturing approach. We think in order to get the best possible display, you need to start by understanding what the levers are and kind of the tolerances in order to get to a good device. And then we also make not just the manufacturing tools, but the metrology is very important. If you can't measure it, then you don't know how much you're off by. And so this is showing just I think a standard piece of glass, what the pitch uniformity is on that, and then the orientation is also kind of like the rotational measurement of how your gratings are set up. All right, so this is kind of the one that gets me very excited, slanted etch. With nano imprint, it's very hard to do this. You generally, with a nano imprint, you need to lay down kind of a resin or a resist layer and then put a stamp into it. Rather than doing that, we're actually kind of subtracting material by using an etch tool that we've made, totally custom development, and that gives you a lot more design freedom in order to make really great waveguides. And so this is showing how we can vary kind of the trench width, as you see here, and that's kind of an impact on the efficiency. And you can just kind of choose where you want that grading width to be on your waveguide. And so this, of course, can be scaled up to high volume manufacturing tool. And then just bringing it all together, kind of the different capabilities that are driving our ability to make some of the best waveguides, right? For productivity, it's 300 millimeter substrates, then the efficiency of the display. So this is kind of something that I don't think we got into with Lauren's talk, but the kind of the battery life of those snap spectacles is very short. It's like under half an hour. And so we need to increase the efficiency, the optical efficiency of these devices. And waveguides are inherently lossy. They throw away a ton of light. And so even a couple of percentage points actually makes a big difference. The metasurface, we think those will come into play on kind of the sensing elements of AR headsets. Uniformity, so we can do local area processing, etch where you want to. that kind of thing. And then I spoke to double-sided processing. So you have those 2 channels of light for every piece of glass that you're using. And then backend is actually very underrated. It's kind of how you complete the build of a waveguide. It's not enough to just make it on a wafer. You have to cut it up. You have to edge blacken it. You have to characterize it, put it in a frame, and then get a light engine to talk to it. And so we're doing all this with, insane precision and with very high quality materials. Yeah, so we have a broad suite of solutions. We're not wedded to just one process flow. We can do nil as well. We can do etch. We can do single, double, triple sheet, front-sided, back-sided, many different types of processing flows go through our line today. And so we think with our materials and our equipment expertise and metrology expertise, we have kind of a best-in-class platform. So please don't hesitate to reach out. I know this was probably a lot of technical detail in a short time, but I'd love to answer some questions.
Awesome, nice. Thank you, Michael, for your definitely in-depth and really amazing stuff you guys are doing. And I did take a quick look, and I saw that your company, at least, is invested in some cutting-edge companies that are working on display technology, like MetaLens and Avegant. So a couple questions that I've seen on the chat. Some companies like Omnivision and maybe and possibly Qualcomm provide quite feature-rich evaluation boards and even engineering support for startups and smaller customers. Does AMAT have any initiatives to work with small startups that want to pair waveguides with platforms like Qualcomm's, or is AMAT primarily interested in selling manufacturing equipment to larger customers?
So our goal is to get to the best possible devices. The traditional business model is for us to sell equipment. Here, we think that the bigger, better opportunity is to make a lot of devices that are kind of leading the way and that folks will want to use to build things. Right now, we don't have any active plans to get something ready for developers to use, but I could see that becoming useful. It's more likely that one of the waveguides that we've made would end up in your hands through another company. So I think it was announced previously that we are manufacturing waveguides for Dispelix, which is a different company that's out there. And so I think that's probably the most likely way that you would get a set of waveguides in your hands, from us at least.
Great, thank you for sharing that. What display type is most efficient that you find with your waveguides, like OLED, LCD, LCOS?
Sure. So I guess the thing is, the waveguides are really just kind of like if you almost imagine, kind of like a separate element from the display. They're not integrated. And so you could integrate like a laser display, and OLED to me is kind of a lower brightness, and so maybe wouldn't be the most popular choice, at least like from what our customers and partners are saying and seeing. But you could use DMD, eventually you could use micro LED. And so I think the important thing is kind of making sure that your efficiency is very high through your material selection. And by going with etching, you don't have to use resist. And so your efficiency is, you kind of start off with a bit of a head start there. And so we can work with any kind of display on that front, on the panel side. I saw a question, typical efficiencies. I think is a really great question. So waveguides are super, super lossy. Like if anyone's seen like a picture of someone wearing a HoloLens front on, it's like glowing, like there's a lot of light going out the front. That's because it's a diffractive waveguide. What we're talking about is something that scatters light out the front, out the sides. And so we need to just, be clear about that. It's difficult to make a diffractive waveguide that can get to 2 or 3%. And so we think we can beat what's currently out there on the market from some of the current leaders by quite a bit, let's just say.
Great. Okay. So a question just in general on the whole AR market. Do you think that mass production of enterprise AR products will allow for a price less than the HoloLens, for example, in the next 5 years or so? Or do you think it's still more further out from your perspective?
Yeah, I mean, I think there already are some solutions for enterprise that are less expensive than HoloLens. If you look at like, some of the Vuzix's of the world or the RealWears of the world, like you can get these headsets. They're just usually very, very small field of view, or
Right.
maybe they don't have kind of the ecosystem built up that a Microsoft does, where you can kind of like share stuff on Teams and do interesting kind of remote sharing. But at least from our perspective, cost is very important. We don't want to be in the business of making a science project where you have a headset that's like $100,000 or something. Like there's only there's very few people who would be interested in buying that.
Definitely. Yeah, I have to check out the Spellix. Okay, well, this is a huge question from Chris, our next speaker. So let's see what he's got. You answered something about the light part, but I'll just go through it. He said you're speaking of flat optics for a smartphone. So I've been requesting the prioritization of flattening the collimation optics between the light engine and waveguide input coupler, particularly with a. So you addressed that first part, right? Did you address the second part about, do you believe the promise of gallium nitride on silicon backplanes will deliver assisting in light collimation with micro LED micro displays?
Interesting. Yeah, the backplanes, I don't know too much about. That's going to be kind of related to like the driver electronics and how they're like setting up the mic, like what the LEDs kind of sit on top of, or the micro LEDs would sit on top of. And so I guess I'm not familiar enough to say whether that's going to affect like the optics qualities, but right, for the whole AR device, I think that we have a lot of interesting things to offer. Right, it's not just a waveguide. I spent a lot of time talking about that, but the light engine itself has these kind of bulky plastic or sometimes even glass optics that are like all packed together. We are hoping to try to get that into the frame or arm of a pair of glasses. Very difficult problem, and the lightness has to be there, and so flat optics I think are a great solution to that problem. And meta lenses are another great solution to sensing when you don't have a lot of like depth to build these little modules into. I think there's a lot of exciting stuff in this area.
Definitely. And of course, the most important question is, how do you manage to have time to surf while you're dealing with this really deep technology?
Oh, that's a great question. I guess the surfing kind of enables the dedicated focus, right?
It's waves, right? So you're dealing with the whole wave optics in it, I imagine.
Exactly.
Sorry, it's
lights
a
are
dad
waves
joke.
and particles, and yeah. So I mean, you have to find a good balance. Sometimes it means doing it before work. Sometimes doing it as much as possible on the weekends. I don't know who asked that one.
Very nice. We'll have to keep it a mystery. Yeah, thank you so much for this great presentation. Please, feel free to put your contact info. I put a blog link to AMAT's, well, at least investing in engineered optics, but I guess that's related. I'd seen something about AMAT Garage, but feel free to put a better link in there and your contact if other people have other ideas, to work with you. Thank you so much. It's been great talking to you and great to know you.
My pleasure.
Michael, thank you for joining. It's a pleasure having you. Awesome. So moving on to our last awesome speaker from Giganti and Reality Factory, leading and bleeding edge research blogs and reports focused on smart glasses, near eye optics display systems, as well as the intersection with the consumer iframes market. We are excited to have Christopher Grayson here with us tonight. He's an analyst on smart glasses, near eye optics, and the premium consumer eyewear market. Christopher Grayson came to the industry from a background in advertising, servicing technology, accounts, and premium brands, including IBM, SAP, American Express, and award-winning work for Intel and Nikon. He studied architecture at Pratt Institute and has worked as a technical illustrator in the finance industry. Chris, glad to have you, and feel free to share your screen.
Yeah, so let me see if this is going to let me. Yeah, it's not letting me select a portion of the screen for some reason. I apologize. We were having a problem with this before. Not sure how to get this to only select a portion instead of my entire. It's like a 36-inch screen with stuff all over it, and I have this one deck here.
Chris, I have your PDF as well if you need me to share, and I can give you remote access.
Oh, wait, no, here it is. Yeah, I think it wasn't letting me because I had selected it before you had selected me. So see if this will let me do it. Advanced, aha, okay. The options weren't coming up because I hadn't been selected yet. There we go. Well, not sure how that's coming in. Is that?
It looks a little big, I think. There you go.
Okay. We good here?
Yeah, it looks good.
Okay. So this article is my first talk based on a new article published last week, principally about the Italian iframes industry, but also the international premium iframes market more broadly, and its intersection with the emerging consumer smart glasses market. So the article is quite long. The copy deck was 40 typewritten pages before adding images. So we'll see how that translates into a 15-minute talk. For those who read my blog, Gigantico, I'm probably more known for tracking developments in near-eye display tech and covering both technical and business perspective. But for those who follow me on Twitter, where I believe I derive most of my traffic, I also extensively cover the premium iframes industry. It's probably 2/3, 3/4 display tech and kind of quarter-ish fashion iframes market. So it's not completely outside of my domain, but not typically covered on the blog. What if the real battle for consumer smart glasses is not taking place in Silicon Valley? It's an admittedly provocative proposition. You look at the competitive landscape. This is how most people in the tech industry view the market's landscape in smart glasses. Typical expected players. Now, I've long since countered this conventional point of view with the proposition that the real battle will not be whether a prospective user purchases, say, Apple smart glasses versus Google smart glasses or Microsoft, whatnot, et cetera, but whether they choose smart glasses at all over continuing to wear conventional corrective vision glasses or sunglasses. The premium eyewear is a mature and growing, in fact, aggressively growing industry in its own right. To tell the story, I'm going to take a trip back into recent history. Okay, in the tech industry, the watershed date of April 15th, 2013 saw the introduction of Google Glass. So crystallizing the tech industry around the pursuit of the next logical human-machine paradigm, that smart glasses are inevitable. Across the pond, a completely different, unrelated set of events were also put into motion that have reconfigured the premium iframes industry. These two sets of unrelated events in different but adjacent industries have unfolded in near choreographed tandem along the same timeline. Most in the tech industry remain unaware of the companies concerned, unaware of the players involved, the dynamics shaping the iframes industry. So now also, I have my detractors on this point of view, even if, as many have suggested, tech is going to crush them and kill them and disrupt the Italian iframes industry and whatnot, like Apple and Google did to Nokia. Okay, fine. you can take that proposition, but nonetheless, it'd still be prudent to understand the dynamics in the industry that you intend to disrupt. So also taking place in 2013, another watershed event took place. So we're going to give some backstory on this. Penalt Pretemps for this family-owned timber business launched in the early 60s, unlikely as that is. Basically a lumber yard, phenomenally successful family business lumber yard. And with success, the business grew and the family diversified into adjacent industries and eventually throughout France into a variety of different sectors. By the 90s, it had grown its portfolio of investments, and it was basically the family business was being run a bit like a private equity firm. So notably, before 2000, they had acquired shareholder dominance in the French fashion luxury goods brand, Gucci. So as the mantle of the family business was passed from father to son, Francois Henry Penalt took the reins of the family business and decided he wanted to move the firm from his father built from a diversified national conglomerate into a vertically integrated global fashion and luxury goods brand stable, flipping from 90% French domestic revenue to greater than 90% international revenue. In doing so, he liquidated most of the family's holdings. And suddenly he was left this huge pile of cash. So he takes this pile of cash and he goes on a buying spree. And he starts buying up previously independent fashion and luxury brands. In time, this strategy was proving successful, and they embarked upon a rebranding of PPR. They rebranded it Caring. So care, it's a Britain word for home. In the Brittany region of France, it's the homeland of the Penalt family. As part of this rebranding exercise, they conducted a year-long research project to educate the family and the business executives on the international fashion luxury goods market. And one of the things that came out of this research, they wished to identify the first brand touchpoint. What is the first product purchase of a buyer that goes on to be a lifelong Gucci shopper? And the answer to that question turned out to be sunglasses. This makes sense. If you think about it, Gucci sunglasses, might run $400 or $500. I've seen some crazy expensive ones that are like, $600 or $700. But if you compare that to say $2,000 pair of Gucci shoes or several $1,000 handbag, it makes sense that their sunglasses are sort of like the gateway drug to high-end fashion and luxury goods. There was just one problem. Gucci didn't make Gucci sunglasses. In fact, they weren't made by Kering at all, but by an Italian iframes house named Cifalo through a lucrative brand licensing contract. So Kering quickly renegotiated to pay Cifalo 90 million euros to retire the contract a couple of years early, regain control of their brand. But this wasn't the end of the story. So this contract was not unique. This kind of brand licensing deal was in fact how most of the industry is structured. Likewise, with Kering's largest competitor, LVMH, it is Moet Hennessy Louis Vuitton Holding Company. It's Louis Vuitton goes first when it's an abbreviation, and Moet Hennessy goes first when it's spelled out because the French are chic that way, and that's what they do. So likewise, the entire Italian iframes market is also structured this way. So the big five of the Italian eyewear manufacturers. Now, one of these companies is a bit unique. Marchon is technically an American company based on Long Island, and further, they're also a subsidiary of Sacramento-based VSP Global, which is the world's largest vision care insurance provider. But their manufacturing plants are all in Italy, together with Luxottica, Cifalo, Marcolon, and Dorigo, the actual Italian-based firms. So Kering's moved to consolidate their iframes business in-house, roiled the Italian iframes industry and sent shockwaves through the French fashion industry. And everyone was waiting to see how LVMH was going to respond to Kering's move. And this ultimately did lead to a big restructuring of the industry. So ultimately, Kering was moving all of their brands in-house into a company that they set up, Kering Eyewear. And then their eyewear licenses were previously sort of diversified between Ciflo, Marklin, and Luxottica. But Ciflo had most of them, and hence they were the biggest losers. So to add insult to injury, they didn't just pull all their brand license back. They also, they poached Ciflo's CEO, Roberto Vedevoto, and brought him in as the CEO of Kering Eyewear. Ciflo's stock price plummeted. So it was a big mess. LVMH ended up taking a much more conservative route. First, they took a 10% stake in Marklin, and then over time, they became 51% owners of a jointly owned subsidiary called Thelios. That they then consolidated all of LVMH's brands. So the big winner in this was Marklin. So now we'll take a look at the 800-pound gorilla in the room, Luxottica. Usually, whenever I talk about the subject, it's basically the only one of the companies anyone's ever heard of. So amidst this industry turmoil, Luxottica had a little bit of M&A activity of their own. They themselves were acquired by the world's largest corrective lens manufacturer, French-based Essilor. But Luxottica's founder, Leonardo Del Vecchio, remained the largest shareholder of the merged company. So he remained the chairman, and anyone who follows the industry could be forgiven for thinking that this acquisition happened the other way around. So at this point, I've set up enough of the backstory. The most important takeaway, this over here, that's Business of Fashion. It's an industry publication that's kind of like the Wall Street Journal of the fashion industry. It's a way of looking at it. And they did an analysis piece on the merger of these two giants, and their sort of conclusion in this article was that the two driving forces in the industry that sort of pushed this merger to happen was a combination of the restructuring of the iframes industry that Kering kicked off by bringing all their brands in-house, combined with the sort of coming industry disruption that will be introduced from the introduction of consumer smart glasses. This is kind of, think of it as sort of like the business battle that they're preparing for. To which one might ask, why does this matter? Many in the tech industry really don't feel that this is their concern. The machinations of like the French fashion and Italian iframes industry maybe only affect a small part of the eyewear market, or people who buy luxury brands or care about fashion or whatnot, and are maybe not so relevant to the broader market that they're pursuing for consumer smart glasses. So I have kind of an anecdote that I've come up with that I respond sort of rebut that position. Okay, here's a question. Here's if you've ever taken a road trip, and I don't mean like Route 1 up and down the coast or something, like a road trip across Middle America. I want to paint a picture here in your mind. If you're on a long stretch of remote highway somewhere, you're pulling into a gas station in like rural Kansas, or a truck stop somewhere in Nebraska or something, right? You see some long haul truck driver climbing down from his cab, like workman boots and some greasy build baseball cap. That son of a bitch is still going to be wearing a $200 pair of Oakleys. Maybe you think about that for a second. This is like a specimen of humanity whose the demographic of which you would assume was the least fashion conscious among us, will still spend more money on a pair of sunglasses. No electronics at all, not even corrective lenses, just sunglasses. Will spend more on those shades than he spent on the Android phone in his pocket. Okay. People care how their faces look, and they especially care how their eyes look. Most people spend a minimum of 30 minutes picking out iframes. Many people own multiple pairs. A quarter of people that buy glasses will spend over 2.5 hours picking out a single pair of frames. Luxottica, well, this is like technically a trade secret. They're rumored to have over 10,000 SKUs. Okay. For this article, I interviewed a variety of people. Two notables. I interviewed Colin Baden, he's a former CEO of Oakley, and Nicola Belli, he's former innovation director from Sfilo, and he was also previously a manager in the space sciences division of Ferrari. I don't have to delve into these interviews here. You can read them on the website, too long to get into, but I'm going to leave you with this quote from Baden. And he's saying, the thing the technology companies don't understand clearly yet. So when you put on a pair of frames on your face, like those frames become your face. You know, your face becomes those iframes. And you think, I mean, even just like language that wraps around this, you talk about, you know, looking somebody dead in the eye. If you're looking somebody dead in the eye, you're talking to them and they're wearing glasses, their glasses are their identity. So we're going to talk about tech again for a moment. Now, I frequently hear friends in the industry will say, this isn't a big deal. You know, Apple is going to kill it. They're the design leaders in the industry. This is the conventional wisdom. Iframes are just, they're lipstick on our tech. This is easy stuff, piece of cake. Apple will pull this off easy. You know, I question this premise. Does Apple really hold any leadership in design in the tech industry? Let's have a look. In September of 2014, Apple did a sneak peek preview unveiling the Apple Watch. It wouldn't be available to purchase until the following spring. So the week prior, it was leaked that famed Australian industrial designer and former creative director of iPod watches, Mark Newson, had joined the Apple industrial design team. It was an open secret that Apple's chief design officer, Johnny Ive, had been wanting to retire for quite a few years. But his role at Apple had been elevated since Steve Jobs' passing, sort of pick up the mantle of creative visionary while Tim Cook was the steely-eyed CEO and kind of division of labor between, you know, Jobs' personality or whatever. Johnny Ive became very, very elevated within the company after Jobs' departure predominantly. And so they were paying him boatloads of money not to retire any earlier than he did. So Ives brought in Newsom. He was supposed to be his heir apparent. This was the succession plan. So Ives could return and retire to UK full time. Not incidentally, same year, Newsom had just launched a line of iframes through Sfilo. And so while venturing into wearable devices, Apple was presumably soon to introduce smart glasses. Newsom was the right industrial designer to bring in. He was clearly the guy. Now, Apple's design team under Ives remained very stable. This photograph is taken of their full industrial design team while they were attending the award show ceremony at the D&AD, Design and Art Directors Award Show in 2012. From 2000 up until the ceremony in 2012, it said that the Apple ID team had turned over only 4 or 5 people in more than a decade. It was a very stable team that had held together for a very long time. When Ives resigned in 2019, it was partially timing driven by other events that were taking place. He developed a bit of a professional rivalry with VP of Supply Chain Management, Jeff Williams. This is kind of out there in the press. You can read about it, how they butted heads for many years on product strategy. And in 2019, Ives resigned. Only days later, Williams was promoted to Chief Operating Officer. So if you look at Tim Cook and his own career, Tim Cook came out of supply chain management. He was promoted to chief operating officer himself by Steve Jobs. This is his exact career path to becoming Apple CEO. It was widely perceived, and I agree with this analysis, that Jeff Williams, that basically Cook was signaling that Jeff Williams was his succession plan, Ives' nemesis. Ives resigned before this announcement went public. Okay, but when Ives departed, he didn't leave alone. Mark Newsom also departed with him as his co-founder in the new firm Lovefrom. Okay, so his succession plan, his heir apparent, departed with him. So Cook responded by putting Jeff Williams, the supply chain guy, in charge of the Apple design studio, in addition to his COO responsibilities. Leading up to the introduction of the Apple Watch, Apple hired several former fashion executives. You have Angela Arendt, from former CEO of Burberry, Patrick Pernod, former VP of Sales from Tag Heuer, which is a subsidiary of LVMH, and Paul Deneve, former CEO of Yves Saint Laurent, part of Kering's collection of brands. Angela was the last to resign. Just weeks before Johnny Ives' own departure, all of them are gone. Okay, so what about that famous design team that Apple has, the one that remained intact for nearly decades under Ives? According to an expose that was done in Apple Insider back in 2019, by the year of Ives' departure, every single one of them had resigned. The entire Apple industrial design team, all of the original members had left. And in fact, on the Apple leadership page on their website, doesn't name one single solitary executive in a design role. Not just no chief design officer, which is Johnny Ives' old title, no VP, no creative director, no nothing. And they haven't had anyone in any design or creative title on their leadership page for over 2.5 years. So I would suggest that, far from being a leadership position, at Tim Cook's Apple today, in the most literal sense, design doesn't even have a seat at the table. Now, Apple is a huge company. I'm sure that among the rank and file, deep within the bowels of Norman Foster's Flying Saucer there in Cupertino, there are surely some talented designers left. But Apple's reputation for design leadership in the tech industry is now coasting on past glory. And I want to say something else. Like, I'm not some Apple basher. Right now, I'm looking at my Mac. iPhone sitting right there. I've been an Apple and Mac user since the 80s. I'm not somebody that just goes around trashing Apple. But just looking at the industry, looking at the company, wearing my analyst hat. Meanwhile, back across the pond, Leonardo Del Vecchio's ability to vote the weight of his shares was restricted in the first 3 years of the Essilor-Luxottica merger. Any CEO appointed to the combined company required approval of board members split between Essilor and Luxottica. So because they would have to have sort of like unanimous consent or this supermajority consent of this evenly split board, and Del Vecchio couldn't vote the weight of his shares for the first 3 years, he simply waited him out. He refused to approve a single CEO that the board put forward for 3 years, and they went through a kind of spell of having some co-CEOs, and then eventually got this sort of like interim CEO, which is his right-hand man, Francesco Milleri, and then just before his 3-year moratorium on voting the weight of his shares came to a conclusion, he managed to push through and get Milleri a seat on the board himself. Now that 3-year moratorium is expired, he can vote the full weight of his shares. Between the weight of his shares and Milleri alone, he basically has control of the board, not to mention he has several other key Luxottica people on that board. So in effect, Essilor acquired Luxottica, but now the founder of Luxottica is in absolute control of the combined company. Now, due to time limitations, I can't get into Del Vecchio's sort of full career bio here, but he's a really fascinating guy. He was an orphan. He was raised in a Catholic orphanage. He rose to be the wealthiest man in Italy. In addition to being the founder of Luxottica, he's also the largest shareholder in Mediobanco, Italy's largest bank. He is a force to be reckoned with. Last fall, the previous rumors of Facebook and Luxottica doing a design partnership were confirmed. Facebook is expecting to launch their first pair of smart glasses co-branded under the Luxottica Ray-Ban subsidiary. Those are supposed to come before the year is out. Facebook's Oculus, I would say, is currently the undisputed leader in VR headsets. They've now struck a partnership with Luxottica and smart glasses. I think it would be foolish to discount the combined competitive ambitions of Leonardo Del Vecchio and Mark Zuckerberg working in collaboration against Apple, and Apple with a gutted design department led by their supply chain guy. This is not a one-horse race. Now, the article is a link there on the slide. It goes into exceptional detail that I can't get into in the length of this talk. I probably run way over my time as it is. But the article goes down a bunch of different alleyways. And if this subject interests you, I would encourage you to read more there. I'll conclude with a token to the supply chain guys. Okay. I also, for this article, I interviewed several attorneys, a couple of pieces in New York, in DC, and a couple of European attorneys that specialize in trade negotiation and international trade, and on the ramifications of moving final assembly of smart glasses to Italy. Now, many tech companies are looking to lessen their supply chain dependence on China and Chinese manufacturing. Italy makes for a compelling alternative to large-scale final assembly of consumer smart glasses. And with that, you can also find me on Twitter, and I'll now see if anyone has any questions.
Thank you, Chris. Barry, take it away with some questions.
All righty. Thank you so much, Chris, for having us as the first presentation people to listen to it. Okay, so there's a lot of good questions on here. Let me just.
All right, let's just take one or two due to time constraints. We're way over. I want to just give others the chance to.
Sure. Do you think it would be easier for the Italians, eyewear companies, to leverage their business connections and desirability of the design experience to release a successful consumer AR headset, or for Silicon Valley to take a page out of their emotional design handbook?
My inclination, I think it would probably be clear from what I presented here and certainly from the article. I think they possess a skill set that that Silicon Valley doesn't have. Again, I know that's particularly probably with this audience, not a popular opinion. But again, if you look at how people actually buy iframes versus, let's look at the Apple Watch for a second. Okay, it's effectively it's one hardware design. It's a, for all practical purposes, it's a tiny miniaturization of the iPhone. Okay, and you can swap up some wristbands. This is not something that you can translate to eyewear. It's not an approach that you can translate to eyewear. again, like, it's not unusual for people to spend hours picking out a single pair of frames. Design variety will be at an expectation much higher than anything that the technology companies are accustomed to pushing out. You can't just go, okay, you can pick the green one or the red one, or whatever. One of the things I talk about in the article, though, I kind of make the point that Google they're accustomed to being an ingredient brand inside of other people's brands, and the fact that they don't make all of the handsets, they license Android out, and they work with a lot of partners. In the way that Apple is not accustomed to being an ingredient brand, they're accustomed to sort of owning the entire brand experience. And I've even suggested in the article that Cifalo is, in my opinion, I think they're very undervalued. Again, some of the things I get into the article is that beyond the scope here, but it basically, their current market cap doesn't correlate to their scale in the market. I think the correction to the carrying reorg was overcompensated in their market value. And I have suggested that Google would maybe want to look at acquiring them. Google's already partnered with them on the design of Google Glass Enterprise Edition 2. Those frames were designed in partnership with Cifalo. So they already have a relationship there, and they could then introduce smart glasses across a broad variety of brand license partners. So you could have, if they're gonna, whatever their Android Wear platform in an iframes, in a smart glasses iframes format, could be available across a variety of aesthetic designs from the Cifalo catalog and their brand licensing deals, which, by the way, these companies would love to work on some of this stuff.
Hey, sorry to cut you off, Chris. Just wanted to wrap it up here and give others the ability to share any projects they're working on.
Oh, sure.
But I appreciate you going into depth on this topic. I found it very compelling. I know Michael's still on, and he might have to hop off in a minute, but if anyone has a question for him, feel free to put it in the chat. Otherwise, you now have the ability to unmute yourself if you'd like to just say hi and introduce yourself to the audience. Feel free to do so. I hope you enjoyed tonight's meetup, and I'll just hang on for a bit if you want to just chat. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks again, Chris.
Sure.
Barry.
Yes, I'm still here.
What's up? Do you have any questions for me, Barry?
Well, how's living in New York City? Is it going to come back to its former self again? What do you think about that? Will AR bring it back? Is that part of the?
Oh man, it's starting to pick up. I live close to Central Park, and the attendance is definitely rising. So that's
Nice.
very exciting. Yeah.
And another favorite topic of yours. What do you think about the Van Gogh immersive experience?
Haven't had the opportunity to see it yet. But thanks for asking.
Maybe someone else can share their experiences.
Yeah.
Very nice.
Yeah. Awesome. I thought it was a good meetup. Hey, Valentine1, nice to meet you. Thanks for staying on.
Yeah, it's a long but good one.
Yeah.
Thanks, everybody.
Yeah, thank you guys. All right. Let's see. Some things are just rolling in the chat here. Mike, there was a talk regarding HD display. Is there a mic Any info on the HD display under a phone tap? You catch that one, Barry? From Stephen T.
About the photon, is this a Michael question?
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. It could
I
have
think
been.
this is for applied materials.
Oh, we just hopped off.
Oh, you did? All right. Yeah, because I did read, but there was something out of SID, the Society of Information Display. It was a talk. It was pretty interesting about putting a very high resolution display below the direct view display on a phone. And kind of, I guess, like cardboard, I guess you would put it to near the eye. But would probably need some kind of optics. But also they could do fingerprint sensors. But there was a whole thing about that with 1 micron or 1 to 2 micron pixels.
I know we had Compound Photonics, and they're supposedly have the smallest pitch size display. So maybe it was Compound. I'm not sure. They had been on last one, or no, I think just the last one. They spoke, but yeah, we know a lot of people at SID. Feel free to email us, and we can try to bring them on. I mean, that's what this is about. The people that are interesting to us, that are coming out with really interesting technologies that hopefully will some hit the mainstream.
Yeah, good stuff.
Thank you. Thanks for joining.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, when are we going to have the in-person meetup,
Yes,
Andy?
we have 2 potential locations that we're looking at now, as you know. So we just got to do some logistics and we'll set it up. Maybe next month or in 2 months.
Yeah.
Next month might be too soon. Maybe in 2 months.
Yeah, we think that, we appreciate everyone coming out. I know it's like a vacation week for a lot of people. In the summer, people I'm sure are itching to get away. But we'll still have it. I think we're gonna have one in the day. Is it you're planning something, a day one for European people and such?
Yes, there is. The next meetup is actually on June. Hold on. The next meetup is, I meant to share this at the end, but I didn't. July 19th, we have Patch Reality with Epic Marble Run, and then Leo Apps. So that's the founder of Leo Apps joining us as well, Dana Loberg. So join for that. And then check out our meetup page, go on the Slack, you get bored. Anyone have any projects they want to share that they're working on?
Anyone have anything cool with haptics? I'm still trying to find the good haptics people. We had Wearworks speak previously, working with blind and visually impaired populations, but we're still. I personally want to hear more about it because I think that's really going to help it take it to the next level as well. Of course, it has a lot of
Thanks,
power
Valentine, for
issues.
joining. Peace.
Thank you. Yeah. So, any suggestions? Send our way.
All right, and I think that's a wrap for New York Augmented Reality tonight.
Thank y'all.
Thank y'all. Peace. I'll be uploading the presentations all separately by speaker, so look out for that. Awesome. So.
Thanks all speakers and everybody.
Chris, is it cool if I upload?
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah, it was great to have you. Is it cool if I upload your presentation, Chris?
Yeah, sure. Please
All
do.
right, awesome. All right, cool. So I'll upload that as well.
Okay.
Beautiful. Thanks, guys.
See you next time.
Peace.